Elon Musk may eventually launch tens of thousands of Starlink satellites. And if you follow the media coverage, you could easily conclude that more satellites and much larger rockets to launch them will give Starlink virtually unlimited capacity. But that conclusion misses the fundamental trade-off governing every satellite telecommunication system. Coverage is not capacity. A network can cover everyone without having enough capacity to serve everyone. And until you understand that distinction, you cannot properly understand Starlink's business or place a value on it. I'm Mark Good. I spent much of my career working with telecommunications companies and evaluating how technology, network architecture, and economics intersect. On this channel, I use first principles analysis to look beneath financial projections and ask a more fundamental question. What must be true for the business model to work? There could be a Starlink satellite passing above me right now. Now, I can't see it with my naked eye, but in this open rural setting, I have something Starlink needs, an unobstructed view of the sky. If terrestrial broadband were unavailable here, I could install a Starlink terminal and connect this location to a satellite hundreds of miles above the Earth. And that's an extraordinary engineering achievement. No trenching fiber along the road, no cell tower nearby, no cable company extending its network to reach one additional property. Once the constellation is in place, Starlink can extend service across enormous areas. That is the power of coverage. But now, let's move inside. Now here in my studio, the situation changes. The satellites are still above me, of course. Starlink's coverage footprint hasn't disappeared. But I can't simply place a terminal on this desk and connect it through the ceiling. Doesn't work. The roof and walls obstruct the required radio path. Now, Starlink recommends placing its terminal outside with a clear view of the sky. I'd probably need to mount the dish on the roof or another exposed part of this building. But this reveals an important principle. Being inside a satellite network's coverage area does not mean the network can deliver service to every location within that area. And even when a connection is technically possible, another question remains. How much capacity is available? And how many customers are going to share it? You see, coverage describes where a signal can reach. Capacity describes how much information the network can carry. They're related, but they're actually not the same thing. Imagine a satellite providing coverage across a vast geographic area. Thousands of people below may all be able to see that satellite, but the satellite has finite power, spectrum, number of usable beams, and finite total throughput. Every active customer consumes some portion of those resources, and that produces the governing trade-off. The farther a satellite network reaches, the more widely its resources may have to be distributed. Now, a useful analogy is sunlight. Sunlight reaches almost half the Earth at any given moment. And spread that over an enormous area, it'll gently warm your skin. But put a magnifying glass between the sun and a piece of paper, and that same light becomes concentrated enough to burn the paper. The difference is concentration. Satellite networks excel at distributing connectivity over immense areas. Fiber excels at concentrating capacity into a neighborhood, a building, or an individual property. Cellular falls somewhere between them. A carrier divides its service area into cells and reuses spectrum in different locations. Wi-Fi concentrates capacity across an even smaller area. Each one of these architectures is optimized for a different problem. And this is where the coverage of SpaceX can create a misleading impression. You see, the public sees increasingly powerful Starship rockets carrying larger numbers of increasingly capable Starlink satellites, and the intuitive conclusion is linear. More satellites must mean proportionally more capacity everywhere. But that's not quite how satellite communication networks actually work. To be clear, additional satellites can increase capacity. They provide more beams, more total throughput, greater resiliency, and more opportunities to reuse frequencies. More capable satellites can increase capacity even further. SpaceX says its next-generation version 3 Starlink satellite is designed to provide approximately 1 terabit per second of downlink capacity. That's roughly 10 times the downlink capacity of its version 2 design. And that's a big deal. But I want to put that 1 terabit into perspective. 1 terabit per second is 1 million megabits per second. Divide that by a 100 megabit connection, and you get approximately 10,000 simultaneous 100 megabit connections. That sounds like a lot. Now, I've simplified this calculation because real networks have overhead, traffic fluctuates, and not all customers use the maximum amount of bandwidth available. So network operators oversubscribe that capacity. But the calculation exposes the underlying issue. The satellite's capacity must be allocated across all the locations being served by its beams. Now let's compare that with fiber. An XGS-PON fiber system provides a nominal 10 gigabits per second in both directions on each port. At 100 megabits per connection, one port represents approximately 100 fully utilized connections. 100 such fiber ports would therefore provide the same theoretical 1 terabit downlink capacity as that one version 3 satellite. But these fiber ports can be installed anywhere demand exists. A network operator can add capacity to another building. Then they can go across the street or add another neighborhood. Capacity can be replicated geographically, and here's the key, and concentrated locally. The same principle applies to cellular networks. When demand increases, a cellular operator can divide a large cell into smaller cells, add sectors, deploy additional spectrum layers, or install equipment inside of heavily used buildings. Cellular operators, of course, face spectrum interference, permitting, and cost constraints of their own. I mean, no communications network has unlimited capacity or is free, right? But terrestrial networks possess a structural advantage in dense markets. They can place additional capacity closer to concentrated demand and reuse their spectrum across increasingly small geographic areas. Now, you might be saying, well, Mark, why not simply direct hundreds of satellites towards the same city? And up to a point, Starlink could allocate additional satellites and beams to high-demand markets. But every satellite is using radio spectrum. And if too many beams reuse the same frequencies over the same location at the same time, they start interfering with each other. Now, engineers can improve the equation through narrower beams, additional spectrum, polarization, better antennas, improved coding, and more sophisticated frequency reuse. And those advances matter enormously, but they don't eliminate the equation. The relevant question is not merely how many satellites are in orbit, which tends to be where the media focus. The better question is how much usable capacity can the system concentrate over this particular location during the busiest hour. A constellation can possess enormous total capacity worldwide while still facing constraints in like Manhattan, London, or Tokyo. Global capacity and local capacity density are different measurements.
None of this is an argument against Starlink. In fact, it explains why Starlink is so valuable. Starlink is not required to outperform fiber in Manhattan to be an exceptional business. Its architecture is strongest where terrestrial infrastructure is unavailable, unreliable, slow to deploy, or uneconomic. What are some use cases? Rural homes, ships at sea, commercial aircraft, remote mines and energy operations, military units. We've seen that in Ukraine and in the war in Iran. Disaster areas where terrestrial infrastructure has been damaged. Communities that may otherwise wait years for a fiber connection, perfect for Starlink. In these markets, reach matters more than extreme capacity density. A satellite system can connect customers without rebuilding a physical network for every road, island, vessel, or isolated facility. Now, that's not a weakness. It is the architecture's defining advantage. But the analytical mistake is assuming that success in those markets proves the same architecture will dominate every market. It won't. Technology businesses become powerful when their architecture is matched to the right problem.
Now, this brings us to the financial analysis. When people evaluate a telecommunications company, they often begin by looking at subscriber forecast. How many customers could the company acquire? What revenue could those customers produce? What margins might the business achieve? What valuation multiple should investors apply? Now, these are all important questions. I mean, absolutely important. But they're not the first questions. Subscribers, revenue, and margins, those are all outputs.
The inputs are spectrum, power, signal propagation, antenna performance, frequency reuse, network capacity, capital cost, and the geographic distribution of demand. So, before accepting a subscriber forecast, ask yourself, where will those subscribers be located? What type of service are they going to purchase? How much data are they going to consume? How much network capacity will be available in those locations? How frequently can that spectrum be reused? And how much additional investment will be required to maintain and expand that capacity? Only after answering those questions should the financial modeling begin. You know, Elon Musk's rockets may determine how quickly Starlink can place capacity into orbit, but rockets alone do not eliminate the trade-off between reach and density. More satellites absolutely can expand coverage. Better satellites, they can expand and increase capacity. More spectrum, better engineering, that can move the boundary a little bit. But no technology escapes the physical architecture on which its economics depend. And that's the larger lesson, not just for Starlink, but for every technology business. Don't begin just with the forecast. Begin with the machine. Understand what it can deliver. Understand where it can deliver it. Understand what constraints govern its performance. Only then examine the market, and only then place a value on the business. Because financial models describe what someone expects to happen. First principles reveal what must be true before it can happen. Capital, as we know, can finance extraordinary engineering, but it cannot negotiate with physics.